There are moments in history when the trajectory of an entire nation pivots on a single decision, a single handshake, a single announcement that at first glance seems too audacious to believe, and yet upon deeper inspection reveals itself to be precisely the kind of bold, unorthodox move that separates global leaders from global followers. What you are about to witness is one of those moments. In the spring of 2025, a bombshell announcement reverberated through the corridors of Wall Street, the halls of Congress, and the executive suites of energy conglomerates spanning 3 continents. Trump Media and Technology Group, the firm behind the social media platform Truth Social, the digital megaphone of a movement, and the financial embodiment of political defiance, announced it was merging with one of the most advanced fusion energy companies on the planet. The partner? TAE Technologies, a California-based powerhouse backed by some of the most formidable names in global finance and technology, including Google and Goldman Sachs. The valuation? More than $6 billion. The mission? Nothing less than cementing American energy supremacy for generations to come. This was not a typical corporate merger. This was not a simple diversification strategy. This was a declaration, a statement of intent that sent shockwaves through every competing nation, every rival energy ministry, and every foreign government that had grown comfortable believing America's best days in the energy sector were behind it. They were wrong. To understand the magnitude of what has just occurred, you must first understand the players involved and the landscape upon which this extraordinary deal was constructed. Trump Media and Technology Group is no ordinary company. Born out of political necessity and ideological conviction, it emerged as a direct response to what millions of Americans viewed as systematic censorship by big tech platforms. Truth Social became its flagship product, a digital town square where free speech was not merely tolerated but celebrated. But the company was never designed to remain a single product enterprise. From its inception, the vision was broader. The ambition was larger. Devin Nunes, the former United States congressman who now serves as chairman and chief executive of Trump Media, had long signaled that the company would evolve beyond its social media origins. Under his leadership, TMTG expanded into financial technology, streaming media, and digital infrastructure. But energy, that was a frontier few expected the company to enter, at least not this soon, and certainly not this dramatically. Yet here we are. On a Thursday that will be remembered as a turning point, Trump Media announced its intention to merge with TAE Technologies in a deal that would, upon completion, create one of the world's first publicly traded fusion energy companies. The transaction, expected to close by mid-2026 pending regulatory and shareholder approvals, would result in both firms holding equal 50% ownership stakes in the combined entity. This is not merely a business transaction. This is a geopolitical chess move of the highest order. But what exactly is fusion power? And why should every American, every citizen of the Western world pay close attention to this development? Fusion energy represents the holy grail of power generation. Unlike traditional nuclear fission, which splits heavy atoms apart and produces significant radioactive waste, fusion works by combining light atoms, typically isotopes of hydrogen, under extreme heat and pressure. This process, the same one that powers the sun itself, releases staggering amounts of energy with minimal associated radioactivity. For decades, scientists and engineers across the globe have pursued this dream. Billions upon billions of dollars have been invested. Entire research institutions have dedicated their existence to cracking the code. And yet, until recently, practical, commercial-scale fusion power remained perpetually 30 years away, a running joke among energy insiders that underscored just how elusive this technology had proven to be. TAE Technologies changed that equation. Founded in 1998, TAE has spent more than 2 decades developing proprietary fusion technology that operates on fundamentally different principles than many of its competitors. Rather than pursuing the tokamak reactor designs favored by projects like ITER, massive international fusion experiment, currently under construction in southern France, TAE has pioneered what it calls a field reverse configuration approach. This method, which the company claims offers superior stability and scalability, has attracted not only scientific interest, but serious financial backing. To date, TAE Technologies has raised more than $1.3 billion from a constellation of heavyweight investors. Google, the search giant whose parent company Alphabet maintains vast data center operations that consume enormous quantities of electricity, recognized early on that fusion power could revolutionize its cost structures and environmental footprint. Goldman Sachs, the Wall Street titan known for identifying transformative investment opportunities before they become obvious to the broader market, similarly placed its bet on T-Vision. Now, Trump Media is joining that elite circle. But it is not merely joining, it is leading. The timing of this announcement is anything but coincidental. Across the United States and around the world, electricity demand is surging at rates that have caught even seasoned utility executives off guard. The culprit: artificial intelligence. The explosion of generative AI applications, from large language models to image synthesis tools to autonomous systems, has created an insatiable appetite for computational power. And computational power at the scale required by modern AI demands electricity. Vast, uninterrupted, reliable electricity. Data centers, once relatively modest facilities, have metastasized into sprawling industrial complexes that consume power equivalent to small cities. According to multiple verified reports from international energy monitoring organizations, AI-related electricity consumption is projected to grow exponentially over the coming decade. Traditional power sources, coal, natural gas, even conventional renewables like wind and solar, are struggling to keep pace. This is where nuclear energy, and specifically fusion, enters the conversation. Nuclear power offers something that few other energy sources can match: density, ease. A single nuclear facility can generate the electricity equivalent of hundreds of wind turbines or thousands of acres of solar panels. It operates around the clock, unaffected by weather conditions or seasonal variations. And unlike fossil fuels, it produces no direct carbon emissions during operation. But conventional nuclear fission carries baggage. Public perception, shaped by disasters at 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima, remains cautious at best and hostile at worst. Regulatory approval processes stretch for years, sometimes decades. Waste disposal remains a politically contentious issue with no universally accepted solution. Fusion sidesteps many of these concerns. The fuel sources, hydrogen isotopes, are abundant. The reaction produces no long-lived radioactive waste. The risk of catastrophic meltdown is essentially non-existent because fusion reactions require such precise conditions that any disruption causes the process to simply stop rather than spiral out of control. If TAE Technologies can deliver on its promises, and if this merger provides the capital and market access necessary to accelerate that timeline, the implications are staggering. Devin Nunes, in announcing the merger, did not mince words. He described the transaction as a step toward a revolutionary technology that will cement America's global energy dominance for generations. He called fusion power the most dramatic energy breakthrough since the middle of the 20th century, a reference to the dawn of the nuclear age itself. These are not idle claims. They are strategic positioning statements designed to frame this merger not merely as a corporate event, but as a national imperative. Consider the current geopolitical landscape. China has invested heavily in fusion research, pouring billions into its own experimental reactors. Russia maintains legacy expertise from its Soviet-era programs. The European Union, through the ITER project, has committed to demonstrating fusion feasibility on a massive scale. These nations and blocs understand what is at stake. Whoever masters commercial fusion power first will possess an almost incalculable strategic advantage. Energy independence is not merely an economic consideration. It is a national security imperative. A nation that controls its own energy destiny cannot be coerced through supply disruptions, cannot be held hostage by foreign producers, cannot be constrained in its industrial or military capacity by external actors. America, despite its abundant natural resources, has watched nervously as competitors close the gap in critical technologies. The semiconductor industry, once utterly dominated by American firms, now depends heavily on foreign manufacturing. Ian, rare earth minerals essential for everything from smartphones to missile guidance systems are overwhelmingly processed in China. The lessons of the past decade have been clear. Supply chains matter, technological sovereignty matters, and energy security matters more than ever. This merger represents an attempt to reclaim that sovereignty in the most fundamental arena of all. But let us be clear-eyed about the challenges ahead. Fusion power, for all its promise, remains unproven at commercial scale. TAE Technologies has made remarkable progress, but progress is not the same as delivery. The company has announced plans to begin constructing what it calls the world's first utility-scale fusion power plant next year, with additional facilities to follow. These are ambitious timelines that will require flawless execution, sustained capital infusion, and favorable regulatory treatment. The merger itself faces hurdles. Regulatory approvals from multiple government agencies will be required. Shareholder votes must be secured. Integration of two very different corporate cultures, one rooted in media and technology, the other in advanced physics and engineering, will test leadership capabilities on both sides. And then there are the skeptics. The energy establishment, comfortable with existing paradigms and wary of disruption, will resist. Competitors with vested interests in alternative technologies will lobby, litigate, and leverage every available mechanism to slow this initiative. Foreign governments, recognizing the threat to their own strategic positions, may deploy economic and diplomatic countermeasures. None of this will be easy. But nothing worth achieving ever is. What we are witnessing is the opening chapter of a story that will unfold over years, perhaps decades. It is a story about technology, certainly about the audacious attempt to harness the same power that fuels the stars. But it is also a story about national identity, about strategic competition, and about the kind of future America chooses to build for itself and for the world. The players have taken their positions. The stakes have been defined. The countdown has begun. In part 2 of this investigation, we will examine TAE Technologies in unprecedented depth, its origins, its scientific approach, and the remarkable journey that brought it to this moment of convergence. We will explore the company's leadership, its competitive positioning, and the technical breakthroughs that have convinced some of the world's most sophisticated investors that fusion power is no longer a distant dream, but an approaching reality. The fusion revolution is not coming. It is here. Today. Every revolution begins with a handful of individuals who refuse to accept the limitations of their time. They look at the impossible and see merely the not yet achieved. They hear the chorus of skeptics and translate it into fuel for their conviction. They understand in ways that their contemporaries often cannot that the boundaries of what is possible are far more elastic than comfortable consensus would suggest. TAE Technologies is the product of such vision. And to understand why Trump media chose this particular company out of all the fusion ventures competing for attention and capital, you must understand the extraordinary journey that brought TAE to this pivotal moment in history. The story begins not in a gleaming corporate headquarters or a government research laboratory, but in the theoretical physics community of the late 20th century. It begins with a question that had haunted scientists for decades. What if the conventional approach to fusion was fundamentally flawed? By the 1990s, the global fusion research community had largely consolidated around a single reactor design known as the tokamak. Originally developed in the Soviet Union during the 1950s and 1960s, the tokamak uses powerful magnetic fields arranged in a donut-shaped configuration to contain superheated plasma, the state of matter in which fusion reactions occur. The approach had demonstrated scientific validity. Fusion reactions could indeed be achieved and sustained, at least briefly, within these magnetic cages. But there was a problem. Actually, there were many problems. Tokamak reactors proved extraordinarily difficult to scale. The engineering challenges multiplied exponentially as scientists attempted to build larger, more powerful devices. The magnets required superconducting materials cooled to temperatures colder than outer space. The plasma, heated to hundreds of millions of degrees, exhibited unpredictable instabilities that threatened to derail experiments at critical moments. And the costs, the staggering, almost incomprehensible costs, continued to spiral upward with each successive project. ITER, the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor currently under construction in Cataraqui, France, stands as the most ambitious tokamak project ever attempted. It represents a collaboration among 35 nations and has consumed, by some estimates, more than $20 billion in funding. Its timeline has slipped repeatedly. Its original target for first plasma, once projected for the mid-2010s, has been pushed back again and again. Even its most optimistic proponents acknowledge that commercial electricity generation remains decades away. This was the landscape into which TAE Technologies emerged, not as another tokamak venture, but as a deliberate departure from the mainstream approach. Founded in 1998 under its original name, TriAlpha-Energy, the company was built upon research conducted by Norman Rostoker, a legendary physicist who had spent decades at the University of California, Irvine. Rostoker, who passed away in 2014, was not merely a scientist. He was a pioneer whose work on plasma physics and particle accelerators had earned him recognition as one of the foremost minds in his field. But Rostoker was also a contrarian. He looked at the tokamak consensus and saw not inevitable progress, but institutional inertia. He believed that alternative approaches that had been explored in earlier decades but subsequently abandoned in favor of the tokamak, deserved renewed attention. Specifically, he championed a concept known as the field reverse configuration, or FRC. The field reverse configuration represents a fundamentally different geometry for containing fusion plasma. Rather than the donut shape of a tokamak, an FRC creates a compact, elongated plasma structure in which the magnetic field lines close upon themselves. This configuration offers several theoretical advantages. It is inherently more stable than tokamak plasmas under certain conditions. It requires simpler, less expensive magnet systems. And critically, it lends itself to a more compact reactor design, one that could, in principle, be manufactured and deployed at scales suitable for commercial power generation. Rostoker's vision attracted collaborators who shared his conviction that the fusion establishment had prematurely narrowed its focus. Together, they secured initial funding and began the painstaking work of translating theoretical concepts into experimental hardware. The company operated in relative obscurity for years. While it consumed headlines and government budgets, TAE quietly built a series of increasingly sophisticated experimental devices, each machine nicknamed with names like Copernicus, Norman, and eventually Copernicus. Two represented a step forward in demonstrating the viability of the FRC approach. The breakthroughs came gradually, then suddenly. In 2015, TAE achieved a milestone that sent ripples through the fusion research community. The company announced that it had sustained a stable plasma at temperatures exceeding 10 million degrees Celsius for more than 5 milliseconds. This may sound brief, and in human terms it is, but in the world of plasma physics, where instabilities can collapse experiments in microseconds, 5 milliseconds represented an eternity. More importantly, the plasma remained stable throughout, demonstrating that the FRC approach could overcome the instability problems that had plagued other designs. The achievement attracted attention from investors who had previously dismissed fusion as a fantasy. Google, always hungry for technologies that could address its voracious energy appetite, took notice. The search giant's parent company, Alphabet, operates some of the largest data center networks on Earth. These facilities consume electricity on an almost incomprehensible scale, enough to power medium-sized cities. Any technology that could deliver abundant, clean, reliable power represented a potential competitive advantage worth billions. Google's investment in TAE was not merely financial. The company also contributed computational resources and machine learning expertise, helping TAE optimize its plasma confinement algorithms in ways that would have been impossible with conventional computing approaches alone. Goldman Sachs, the investment banking titan, whose influence spans global markets, similarly recognized the strategic value of positioning early in what could become the most transformative energy technology of the century. The firm's investment brought not only capital but credibility, a signal to other institutional investors that TAE was a serious enterprise worthy of serious consideration. By 2025, TAE Technologies had raised more than $1.3 billion from a constellation of sophisticated backers. This was not venture capital flowing to yet another software startup promising to disrupt some narrow market segment. This was growth capital for a company attempting to solve one of the most challenging engineering problems humanity has ever confronted. But capital alone does not build fusion reactors. Leadership matters. Vision matters. The ability to attract and retain world-class talent in a fiercely competitive market for scientific expertise matters enormously. TAE leadership team reflects the company's dual identity as both a cutting-edge research organization and a commercially oriented enterprise. The technical ranks include veterans of national laboratories, university physics departments, and competing fusion ventures. The business side draws from energy industry executives, investment professionals, and technology sector leaders who understand how to navigate the complex intersection of innovation, regulation, and market dynamics. This combination, deep scientific expertise paired with commercial acumen, distinguishes TAE from many of its fusion competitors. Some rival ventures have brilliant scientists but lack the business infrastructure to translate research achievements into deployable products. Others have slick marketing operations but questionable technical foundations. TAE appears to have assembled both components in a coherent organizational structure. The company's scope has also expanded beyond pure fusion research. TAE umbrella organization includes TAE Life Sciences, a subsidiary that develops technologies and therapeutic drugs for treating cancer patients. This diversification is not accidental. The physics underlying fusion research, particularly the manipulation of high-energy particles, has applications in medical technology. By pursuing these adjacent opportunities, TAE has created additional revenue streams and technological synergies that strengthen its overall position. The energy storage division represents another strategic extension. TAE has developed power delivery systems for batteries and electric vehicles, leveraging its expertise in plasma, physics, and electrical engineering. These products generate near-term revenue, while the longer-term fusion program continues its development trajectory. This portfolio approach reflects a sophisticated understanding of how to sustain a capital-intensive research enterprise over the multi-decade timelines that fusion development requires. Pure research organizations, dependent entirely on investor patience and government grants, often struggle to survive funding droughts or shifts in political priorities. Companies with diversified revenue streams possess greater resilience. Yet even with all these advantages, the technical breakthroughs, the sophisticated investors, the diversified business model, TAE faced a fundamental constraint. Fusion power, to achieve its transformative potential, must eventually operate at utility scale. It must generate electricity reliably, economically, and in quantities sufficient to justify the enormous capital investments required. Research reactors and experimental devices, however impressive, do not power cities. This is where the Trump media merger becomes not merely significant, but potentially decisive. The joint announcement stated that the combined company plans to begin constructing the world's first utility-scale fusion power plant next year, with additional facilities to follow. This timeline is extraordinarily ambitious. No fusion company anywhere on Earth has yet demonstrated net energy gain, the point at which a reactor produces more energy than it consumes. TAE is proposing to leapfrog directly to commercial-scale construction. How is this possible? What gives TAE leadership the confidence to make such bold commitments? Part of the answer lies in the nature of the FRC technology itself. Unlike tokamak designs, which require massive complex facilities to achieve the necessary plasma conditions, field reverse configurations can theoretically operate in more compact reactor formats. A TAE commercial plant would not need to replicate the cathedral-scale engineering of ITER. It could, in principle, be constructed using more conventional industrial methods. Part of the answer also lies in the capital infusion that this merger provides. Trump media brings not only investment capital but public market access, the ability to raise funds from equity markets at scales that private fundraising cannot easily match. A publicly traded fusion company can tap into a vastly larger pool of potential investors, including institutional funds, pension systems, and individual shareholders who believe in the technology's long-term potential. It lacks the apocalyptic drama of nuclear weapons development, but its consequences may ultimately prove even more profound. The race for fusion energy has become, whether most citizens realize it or not, a central arena of great power competition. And the Trump media TAE Technologies merger has just signaled that America intends to win. To appreciate the strategic stakes, one must first understand what energy dominance truly means in the 21st century context. Energy is not merely a commodity. It is the substrate upon which all economic activity rests. Manufacturing requires energy. Transportation requires energy. Agriculture, from the tractors that plow fields to the refrigeration systems that preserve harvests, requires energy. The digital economy, often imagined as somehow ethereal and disconnected from physical constraints, is in fact voraciously energy dependent. Every search query, every streaming video, every artificial intelligence computation consumes electricity. A nation that controls abundant, cheap, reliable energy possesses advantages that cascade through every sector of its economy. Its factories operate at lower costs. Its military maintains superior logistics. Its citizens enjoy higher standards of living. Its diplomats negotiate from positions of strength rather than dependency. Conversely, a nation dependent on imported energy operates under perpetual vulnerability. Supply disruptions, whether from geopolitical conflicts, natural disasters, or deliberate coercion, can cripple economies and constrain policy options. Energy dependency is strategic weakness, and every serious government understands this reality. This is why the pursuit of fusion power has become beneath the surface of public attention, a matter of intense national security focus for every major power on Earth. China's fusion program represents perhaps the most formidable competitor to American ambitions. The People's Republic has invested billions of dollars into multiple fusion research initiatives, approaching the challenge with the same strategic patience and massive resource mobilization that has characterized its rise in semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and advanced manufacturing. The experimental advanced superconducting tokamak, known as EAST, operates at the Hefei Institutes of Physical Science. This device has achieved remarkable milestones in recent years, sustaining superheated plasma for record-breaking durations. According to verified reports from international scientific monitoring organizations, EAST has maintained plasma temperatures exceeding 100 million degrees Celsius for periods that demonstrate genuine progress towards sustained fusion reactions. But China is not relying on a single approach. The nation is also constructing its own contributions to the International ITER project, while simultaneously pursuing alternative fusion technologies through parallel research programs. This diversified strategy, characteristic of Chinese industrial policy more broadly, hedges against the risk that any single technological pathway might prove unviable. Perhaps more concerning from an American strategic perspective is China's demonstrated ability to translate research achievements into industrial-scale deployment with remarkable speed. The nation's solar panel manufacturing dominance, its rapid build-out of high-speed rail networks, its aggressive expansion of electric vehicle production, all illustrate a capacity for scaling technologies that the United States has often struggled to match. If China achieves commercial fusion power before America, the consequences would extend far beyond energy markets. It would represent a symbolic and substantive shift in global technological leadership. It would provide China with industrial cost advantages that could accelerate its already formidable manufacturing competitiveness. And it would create dependencies, other nations reliant on Chinese fusion technology, Chinese components, Chinese expertise that would enhance Beijing's geopolitical leverage for generations. This is the competitive reality that frames the Trump media TAE merger. This is what Devin Nunes means when he speaks of cementing America's global energy dominance for generations. Russia presents a different but equally significant dimension of the competitive landscape. No. The Russian Federation inherited the Soviet Union's extensive nuclear research infrastructure, including pioneering work on tokamak designs that laid the groundwork for modern fusion science. Russian physicists and engineers possess deep expertise in plasma physics, materials science, and nuclear engineering accumulated over more than 7 decades. However, Russia's fusion program has been constrained by economic limitations that have prevented the kind of massive investments that China and the United States can mobilize. The Russian economy, heavily dependent on fossil fuel exports, has faced persistent challenges in funding cutting-edge research at globally competitive scales. Yet this creates its own strategic dynamic. Russia's economic model depends on continued global demand for oil and natural gas. The emergence of practical fusion power anywhere in the world threatens to undermine the foundations of Russian state revenue. This gives Moscow a complex set of incentives regarding fusion development, interest in the technology for its own strategic purposes, combined with concern about how fusion might diminish the value of Russia's primary exports. How Russia might respond to an American fusion breakthrough is a question that strategic planners in Washington must consider carefully. Economic disruption in Russia has historically correlated with political instability and, at times, aggressive foreign policy behavior. The transition away from fossil fuels, if it occurs rapidly, could create significant turbulence in international relations. The European Union approaches fusion primarily through its leadership role in the ITER project. This massive international collaboration involving contributions from the European Union, United States, China, Russia, Japan, South Korea, and India represents humanity's most ambitious collective attempt to demonstrate fusion feasibility. ITER scale is almost beyond comprehension. The facility, under construction in southern France, will contain the world's largest tokamak reactor, a machine weighing approximately 23,000 tons, requiring superconducting magnets cooled to temperatures colder than deep space. Designed to produce 500 megawatts of fusion power from 50 megawatts of input heating. If successful, ITER will prove that fusion can produce net energy gain at scales relevant to commercial power generation. This would represent a historic scientific achievement, validating decades of theoretical work and billions of dollars in research investment. But ITER also illustrates the limitations of multinational mega projects. The timeline has slipped repeatedly. Original projections for first plasma have been pushed back by years, with current estimates targeting the late 2030s for initial operations and the 2040s for full deuterium-tritium fusion experiments. Costs have escalated dramatically beyond initial budgets. Coordination among dozens of countries with different technical standards, procurement processes, and political priorities has proven enormously challenging. Meanwhile, private fusion companies, including TAE Technologies, are moving faster. They are not burdened by the bureaucratic complexity of international collaborations. They are not constrained by government procurement regulations designed for Cold War-era weapons programs. They operate with the urgency of commercial enterprises that must deliver results or lose investor support. The Trump media merger amplifies this dynamic. By providing TAE with enhanced capital access and public market visibility, the deal accelerates a timeline that was already outpacing ITER glacial progress. If TAE can deliver even a fraction of its announced construction schedule, the first utility-scale fusion plant could be generating electricity before ITER achieves first plasma. This would reshape the global fusion landscape entirely. ITER would remain scientifically valuable, but strategically secondary. The center of gravity in fusion development would shift decisively to the United States. Strategic competition, however, does not occur only between nations. It occurs within them as well. And the regulatory and political environment within America will play a decisive role in determining whether the Trump media becomes reality. Nuclear energy, in any form, operates within one of the most heavily regulated environments in the American economy. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, established in 1975, maintains rigorous oversight of all civilian nuclear activities. Licensing processes for new nuclear facilities can extend for years, sometimes more than a decade before construction even begins. Environmental reviews, safety assessments, public comment periods, and judicial challenges can delay or derail projects indefinitely. Fusion energy occupies an uncertain position within this regulatory framework. Technically, fusion is distinct from fission in fundamental ways. The reaction mechanisms differ. The waste profiles differ. The safety characteristics differ. A fusion reactor cannot experience the kind of runaway chain reaction that caused the Chernobyl disaster. There is no equivalent of spent fuel rods requiring millennia of secure storage. Yet the regulatory infrastructure was designed for fission. Adapting it to fusion's unique characteristics will require legislative action, agency rulemaking, and potentially years of administrative process. The question is whether American institutions can move quickly enough to enable rather than obstruct the ambitious timelines that TAE and Trump media have announced. Here, the political dimensions of the merger become directly relevant. Trump media is not a politically neutral entity. It is closely associated with a specific political movement and a specific set of policy priorities. This association could accelerate regulatory reform if aligned political forces control the relevant levers of government. It could equally provoke resistance from opposing political coalitions determined to obstruct initiatives associated with their adversaries. The coming years will test whether America can subordinate partisan rivalries to national strategic interests. For fusion power, if achieved, would benefit all Americans regardless of political affiliation. Cheap, abundant, clean energy with lower costs for consumers, strengthen domestic manufacturing, reduce environmental impacts, and enhance national security. These are not partisan outcomes. They are American outcomes. Yet the polarized nature of contemporary politics creates risks that strategic opportunities could be sacrificed to tactical conflicts. This is a vulnerability that competing nations, particularly China, with its capacity for sustained long-term strategic planning, unconstrained by electoral cycles, may seek to exploit. The artificial intelligence revolution adds urgency to these dynamics. As discussed earlier, AI-related electricity demand is growing at exponential rates. Data centers that power large language models, autonomous systems, and advanced analytics consume electricity on scales that are straining existing grid infrastructure. According to verified projections from international energy monitoring agencies, AI-related electricity consumption could increase by multiples of current levels within the coming decade. This growth will require either massive expansion of generation capacity or fundamental improvements in energy efficiency, most likely both. Fusion power is uniquely positioned to address this challenge. A single commercial fusion plant, once operational, could generate electricity sufficient to power enormous computational facilities. If the United States can deploy fusion technology while competitors remain in the experimental phase, American technology companies will enjoy decisive advantages in AI development. They will have access to cheap, abundant power that their foreign rivals cannot match. This creates a feedback loop with profound implications. American AI leadership would accelerate further technological development. That development would generate economic growth, military capabilities, and soft power that reinforce American global influence. Competitors would find themselves falling further behind in multiple domains simultaneously. Fusion is not merely about electricity. It is about the entire trajectory of 21st century technological civilization. The geopolitical chessboard is set. America, through the Trump media TAE merger, has advanced a powerful piece. China is mobilizing its own forces. Russia calculates from a position of both opportunity and vulnerability. Europe watches, uncertain whether its multilateral approach can compete with more agile actors. But the game is far from over. Technical challenges remain immense. Financial resources, however substantial, are not unlimited. Political obstacles could emerge from multiple directions. And the fundamental physics of fusion, the difficulty of sustaining reactions at the temperatures and pressures required, continues to humble those who underestimate its complexity. In Part 4 of this investigation, we will examine what comes next. We will explore the construction timeline that TAE and Trump media have announced. assessing its feasibility and the milestones that must be achieved. We will investigate the potential economic impacts of commercial fusion power for American workers, industries, and communities. We will consider the environmental implications and the transformations that abundant clean energy could enable. And we will conclude by assessing the broader historical significance of this moment. The future is being written now, and the pen is in American hands if America chooses to use it. There are inflection points in human history so consequential that they divide time itself into before and after. The mastery of fire, the invention of the printing press, the harnessing of electricity, the splitting of the atom. Each of these breakthroughs fundamentally altered the trajectory of civilization, expanding the boundaries of what humanity could achieve and reshaping the structures of power that govern human affairs. We stand now at the threshold of another such moment. The fusion of atomic nuclei, the same process that powers the stars themselves, may soon be brought under human control at scale sufficient to transform our world. And if the announcements from Trump media and TAE Technologies translate into operational reality, America will lead that transformation. This is not merely a story about energy. This is a story about the future itself, who will shape it, who will control it, and what kind of world will emerge from the choices being made today. The construction timeline announced by the merged entity is, by any historical standard, extraordinarily ambitious. TAE Technologies and Trump media have declared their intention to begin building the world's first utility-scale fusion power plant next year, with additional facilities to follow as the technology matures and scales. To appreciate what this means, consider the typical timelines for major energy infrastructure projects. Conventional nuclear fission plants, from initial licensing application to commercial operation, often require 15 to 20 years or more. Large hydroelectric dams can take decades from conception to completion. Even natural gas combined cycle plants, among the fastest major generation facilities to construct, typically require 5 to 7 years from groundbreaking to first power. TAE is proposing to compress fusion development, a technology that has never been demonstrated at commercial scale, into a timeline that rivals the fastest conventional projects. This is either visionary confidence or reckless overreach. The coming years will reveal which. Several factors could enable accelerated timelines that would be impossible for conventional nuclear projects. First, fusion's inherently different safety profile may permit streamlined regulatory treatment. Because fusion reactions cannot sustain themselves without continuous external input, unlike fission chain reactions that require active intervention to stop, the catastrophic failure modes that drive extensive fission safety requirements simply do not apply. A fusion reactor that loses containment does not melt down. It simply stops. Second, TAE field reverse configuration approach, as discussed earlier, lends itself to more compact reactor designs than traditional tokamaks. Smaller facilities require less material, less construction time, and less capital. If TAE technology performs as claimed, manufacturing and deployment could potentially occur at rates impossible for cathedral-scale projects like ITER. Third, the merger provides financial resources and market access that remove traditional capital constraints. Fusion ventures have historically struggled to sustain funding through the long development cycles that the technology requires. Investors grow impatient. Government priorities shift. Projects stall or collapse not because the science fails, but because the money disappears. A publicly traded entity with access to equity markets can raise capital at scales and timelines that private ventures cannot match. Yet, formidable obstacles remain. The fundamental physics of fusion, achieving and sustaining the conditions necessary for net energy production, has humbled generations of brilliant scientists. Plasma behavior at fusion temperatures is notoriously difficult to predict and control. Materials that can withstand the extreme conditions inside a fusion reactor for years of continuous operation do not yet exist in proven, deployable forms. The engineering required to translate laboratory demonstrations into reliable industrial equipment represents a leap that no one has yet completed. TAE leadership expresses confidence that these challenges are surmountable. Their experimental results, they argue, demonstrate that the field reverse configuration approach can achieve stable plasma confinement at relevant temperatures. Their material science programs are developing advanced components designed specifically for fusion environments. Their computational models, enhanced by machine learning techniques contributed by their technology partners, predict performance with increasing accuracy. Whether this confidence is justified will be tested not in press releases or investor presentations, but in the brutal crucible of engineering reality. Fusion has broken promises before. The history of the field is littered with announced breakthroughs that failed to materialize, timelines that slipped by decades, and ventures that consumed billions before quietly disappearing. This time could be different, or it could follow the familiar pattern. Only time will tell. Assuming, however, that T and Trump media succeed, that commercial fusion power becomes operational within the timeframes they have suggested, what would the economic consequences be for America? The impacts would cascade through virtually every sector of the economy, reshaping industries, creating new opportunities, and disrupting established patterns in ways both predictable and surprising. Consider manufacturing first. American industrial competitiveness has eroded over decades, driven in part by energy costs that exceeded those in competing nations. Factories relocated to countries with cheaper power. Jobs follow. Communities that once thrived around manufacturing centers hollowed out, leaving behind economic despair and social dysfunction. Abundant, cheap fusion power could reverse this trajectory. Manufacturing facilities consume enormous quantities of electricity. So, if that electricity costs a fraction of current prices, production economics shift dramatically. Suddenly, domestic manufacturing becomes viable for products that have been surrendered to foreign competitors. Supply chains that stretched across oceans could be consolidated within American borders. The industrial base that underwrites both economic prosperity and military capability could be rebuilt. The implications for employment would be substantial. Manufacturing jobs, despite decades of decline, remain among the highest paying opportunities available to workers without advanced degrees. They support middle-class lifestyles, stable communities, and the kind of economic security that has become increasingly rare in the modern economy. A manufacturing renaissance powered by fusion energy would create opportunities for millions of American workers. But the impacts extend beyond manufacturing. Agriculture, often overlooked in discussions of energy policy, is profoundly energy intensive. Modern farming depends on machinery powered by diesel fuel, fertilizers produced through energy-intensive chemical processes, irrigation systems that pump water across vast distances, and cold storage facilities that preserve harvests for distribution. Cheaper energy would reduce costs throughout the agricultural supply chain, benefiting both farmers and consumers. Transportation would undergo equally significant transformation. Electric vehicles, already gaining market share, are constrained by the electricity required to charge them. If that electricity becomes dramatically cheaper and cleaner, the economic case for electrification strengthens further. Long-haul trucking, currently dependent on diesel, could transition to electric drivetrains powered by abundant fusion electricity. Shipping, aviation, and rail would face similar pressures and opportunities. The technology sector's hunger for electricity has already been discussed, but the specifics deserve elaboration. Artificial intelligence, cloud computing, cryptocurrency mining, and countless other digital industries are fundamentally constrained by power availability and cost. Data centers cluster in locations with cheap electricity, often near hydroelectric facilities in the Pacific Northwestern states with favorable utility rates. Fusion power would liberate these industries from geographic constraints. Data centers could be sited anywhere, reducing latency, improving resilience, and enabling applications not currently feasible. Real estate markets, regional development patterns, and urban planning would all feel the effects. Communities currently disadvantaged by limited energy infrastructure could become attractive for investment. Rural areas, often bypassed by economic development, could host new industries attracted by land availability and fusion-powered electricity. The geographic distribution of American prosperity could shift in ways not seen since the interstate highway system transformed the mid-20th century economy. The environmental implications of commercial fusion power are equally profound and perhaps more consequential for humanity's long-term prospects. Climate change, whatever one's views on policy responses, represents a genuine physical phenomenon with measurable effects on weather patterns, sea levels, and ecological systems. The combustion of fossil fuels releases carbon dioxide that accumulates in the atmosphere, altering the planet's energy balance. The countries that develop nuclear weapons reshape the international order according to their interests. Fusion energy, if mastered, will confer similar advantages on whoever achieves it first. The military implications: fusion-powered naval vessels with unlimited range, directed energy weapons with inexhaustible power supplies, industrial bases immune to energy blockades, are profound. The diplomatic leverage that comes from controlling technology that others desperately need requires no elaboration. China understands this. Russia understands this. The European Union understands this. Every serious government on Earth understands that the fusion race is, beneath its technical complexity, a competition for civilizational primacy. America has now signaled through this merger its intention to compete aggressively. Trump media brings capital, market access, and political connectivity. TAE Technologies brings decades of research, proven scientific achievements, and a technological approach that may offer advantages over competing designs. Together, they form an entity capable of pursuing fusion commercialization at a pace that neither could achieve alone. Success is not guaranteed. The technical challenges remain immense. The regulatory obstacles could prove insurmountable. The competition from China and others will be relentless. Unforeseen difficulties, material failures, cost overruns, scientific setbacks could derail even the most carefully planned programs. But the attempt itself matters. No willingness to pursue bold objectives, to accept significant risks in pursuit of transformative rewards, to bet on American ingenuity and determination, these are the qualities that have defined American greatness across generations. The fusion age is coming. The only question is whether America will lead it or follow others into a future shaped by different hands according to different values. The announcement from Trump media and TAE Technologies suggests that America, once again, intends to lead. The stars have burned with fusion fire for billions of years, long before humanity existed to observe them. They will continue burning for billions more, indifferent to the struggles of the species that has briefly inhabited one small planet orbiting one ordinary star in one unremarkable galaxy. But humanity has never accepted its limitations. We have always reached for what seemed impossible, and sometimes we have grasped it. We mastered fire. We conquered the skies. We walked on the moon. We split the atom. Now we reach for the star's own fire. If we succeed, we will have secured not merely energy abundance, but something more profound. Proof that human ambition, human ingenuity, and human determination can overcome even the most daunting challenges. Proof that the future belongs to those bold enough to seize it. The merger announced this week is one step on that journey. It is not the destination. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it may be, as another leader once said in another time of great consequence, the end of the beginning. The fusion age awaits. And America has just announced its intention to be there first. This has been a special documentary investigation